Hi there, welcome back to the channel. This is, again, something completely different. And it's a continuation of something I started some time back. I did a restoration of a piece of equipment. It belongs to a friend of mine who's a fanatic for old style recordings. I did two, actually. I did a preamp and I did I believe, a microphone preamp as well. Now, this thing is a Magnecord reel-to-reel tape recorder. The previous one I did was the preamp section for a Magnecord reel-to-reel tape recorder. It was the Magnecord, actually it's called a Magnecorder PT6V, and I'll link the series above if you want to look at that. It turned out very well, but it needed the head. That's what it's all about. It needed this thing, and my friend got it. Now the problem is we can't find any information on this thing. We believe it's the P75A. I can't confirm that. I have a service manual for P63A, which does look physically quite similar. So that's all I can go by. And I have a confession to make. I know very little about tape recorders, especially from this era. In fact, I know nothing about tape recorders, especially from this era. So this is really a learn and do project. And it's a very simple mechanism. It's a very simple circuit. So it's a question of just learning as we go along and improving it. Optimistic, aren't I? It's happened before. You know, this sort of thing is you understand the language. You haven't read the book yet. This is just another book. So one has to find its secrets and try and improve it if one can. Now, I have the service manual for the 63. I'm going to basically go buy that one and see where the differences occur. I'm sure there are some. I have no idea whether this thing works at all. I'm not going to turn it on just yet. This is a 110 volt system. It came from the States. So I've got the isolation or the Variac, which allows me to do that. But I cannot forget that this is 110 volts. Okay? Remind me. Otherwise, bad things will happen. And we don't want that to be the case. So I'm going to show you a little bit in a little bit more detail what we have here and see if we can sort of figure out what it is we're dealing with. This is what we've got here. We've got the two motors. They seem to be spinning. We've got a switch here which says manual Q, fast Q, and operate. And that switch seems to be doing its job. We have the record on button. We've got rewind, stop, forward, and I think this is fast forward. I can't read that. It's faded. And on this side, we've got a power on indicator, and we've got a switch that says slow, off, and fast. Now that switch seems to be getting stuck, so we'll have to have a look at that. This opens, and we get the three heads on here. I believe this is the erase head, this is the record head, and this is the playback head. This is from reading on the manual that I've got on the screen there, which I'll show you in a second. I can't tell you what state they're in. I'll have to sort of look underneath, but these obviously need cleaning. This is not latching too well, but we'll get there. It's not in bad condition. I mean, there's a little bit of rust. There's a pretty obvious ding on here, but it's only on the faceplate, so I'm sure we can sort that out. Other than that, the front doesn't show much. So what do we have here? We've got ourselves two motors and another one down here. I don't even know what these motors are, but I will know by the end of this restoration, I can assure you. Power supply is over here. Got a tube on there, which I think is it's a 12BH7. I thought it was a 12AU7, but this is obviously for the oscillator. This thing has an oscillator for the tape. I believe it's the erase. Yep. Very hefty resistor on here, probably dropping voltage. This is a bias adjustment. We've got two filter caps on here that are isolated from the chassis. This is obviously, well, I believe it's from the power supply. And this has got an enormous amount of, well, it's motors and solenoids really, isn't it? That's what you're talking about. We've got ourselves two motor capacitors here, which I hope are working. because I don't know that I can find those. What is that? 4 microfarads, 350 volts. I really don't want to replace those because they look good. This whole thing has got to look good. I mean, that's the whole point, restoring it to its original or leaving it as original as possible. Huge solenoid on here. There's another solenoid down here. All the wiring is sort of goes onto these connectors, screw on, and they're all very well labeled. I don't know whether the numbers will correspond at all to the service manual I've got, but you've got this block. There's another block down there. There's another block over there. And then another big block down here. So everything is going point to point. Very well loomed. I see a couple. No, these things look original. I don't think anybody has been in here. I don't see any signs of anybody having messed around with this. There's the usual sort of dust and grime, but that's normal. 4 capacitors here. These I think are the coupling. These are wax. I'll have to check for leakage. Probably have to replace those. There's another big motor capacitor, so it'll be one for each. Yeah, a lot of mechanical stuff. This thing's broken. I don't know what this is. This is sort of a... Is this an oil thingy? You guys would probably know about this. I'm thinking this guy's dumb. I have no idea what this is. It's a tube. It goes down here and it's got a cap on it. My logic is that you pump oil in there. But that's my logic. We'll have to see what the instructions say. So this is very well built. Very well built. I don't know what I'm going to find in here. I'm hoping that it's in good condition. And that's what I'm going to do next. Before I start doing anything, I'm going to be looking at the service manual and doing cleaning at the same time. I've mentioned this before. When you do cleaning, you learn an enormous amount about what you're dealing with. First of all, you get very close and you see things that otherwise you might escape you. But you know, connections that might be loose or screws, these screws that might be missing. When you clean, you see all that. And I believe that the major part of this job is going to be cleaning. There are 2 very, very big ballast type resistors on here. Variable, you can adjust it. You loosen that there and you move it up or down. These things are fixed, so I'm not going to mess with it. I'm sure they'll tell us in the instructions how to adjust it and what voltages we're supposed to be getting. And that's basically it. So next thing I'm going to do is just open this back off and see what we've got. Okay, we've got a bit more electronics on here. This one is, what is that, 2 microfarad, 400 volts, so no big deal. That can be swapped out. These caps, pretty accessible. There's a resistor on here. And then it all goes to there where the magic happens. Okay, let's see if we can make head or tail of that. A couple of fuses on here, a lot of wax caps on there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think it is. There are 2 selenium rectifiers down there, that one and that one. These are hefty beasts. Okay, quite big. A switching board down there. And on top here, there are a few more components, a few capacitors, a few resistors. I'll have to check the schematic and see what that's all about. This is the bias. So this will probably be the oscillator section here with the tube on top. We can obviously test that. That shouldn't be too hard. I don't think this is difficult. I think you just got to be careful, especially since I don't have an actual service manual that I can refer to if I make any cock-ups. So yeah, okay, time to get started on this. As I said, I'm going to be checking things up with the service manual. It's quite complete. This thing, as I said, is for the P63. This obviously belonged to a tech because he's got all these notes on here. This is the one we're looking at here, which is pretty similar physically, except the center doesn't look like this. P63A. Here are the specs. And we've got full description Yeah, that's pretty complete. Teaching you how to use it, which I probably need. And then we've got some of the maintenance work. Demagnetization and alignment, amplification, tension. We've got some voltages here. Where did I see that? Yeah, some of these settings you have reference voltages for. And here it is. How to do the testing, the tensioning, or the break. And this is where I got the first idea that these were the same. This thing looks very, very similar to what we have here. In fact, I can't see any differences except maybe in the types of capacitors they've used. These are sort of the bumblebee type. The one I've got there is just straight wax. So maybe this one here is a little bit older than the, well, it's different, not older. I have no idea. Bias adjust, we've also got that there. We've got the two fuses, that resistor, the tube, and looking at it from the underside, tape break adjustment. It's all the same. It really is the same. Some of these are just from the instructions. And then we've got ourselves a schematic. It seems to be a pretty full schematic. So going from here should make things a lot easier. We will find out. Where's the... See, we had two selenium rectifiers on here. I only see one. I wonder if this is the entire circuit. Mind you, those two selenium rectifiers could be just two diodes and they've used two of them. I have no idea. But we'll find out. All the solenoids, you can see the connectors on there. Somebody's obviously been on this schematic checking stuff. Tape break switch over there. It all looks very similar. As I said, there's one thing I can't find here, and that is, yeah, there we go. No. I still can't find the other selenium rectifier. There's this one here. But that one there, as I said, might not be a bridge. For all I know, it could be 4 separate diodes. And here they've got the tube, and the tube they've got here is a 12AU7. Right, so that's very instructive. This will tell us what we're looking at in terms of components. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that on the screen and start. Where do we start? Start from the power cord. Start cleaning from the power cord. See what we come across. That's always instructional. All right, I'll keep reporting as I carry on with this mystery, rabbit hole, whatever we want to call it. Okay, first report back. I've started finding that this thing does not correspond to the schematic that I have for the 63, which is pretty bad news. However, I want to show you what I've found. Let me close up and show you what I've got here. The main purpose of tracing the schematic and going from line to line, component to component, is really to find faulty components, right? And the one thing that I was worried about is these wax caps. Really worried about them. They usually leak and they lose their value. And I mean, this thing's from late 50s. So it's 70 years old. But watch this. That thing there, I clipped that capacitor. Just clip the one end there. It's a 100 nanofarad capacitor. Look at what it gives me. This thing is absolutely spot on. It's incredible. Incredible. The other thing I noticed is I did the same with one of the resistors, and it was out by about 0.1%. So what I'm hoping, really hoping, since the schematic does not match the one I've got, what I'm hoping is that the components are all of this standard. And I can actually go through and just clean it up and really sort of troubleshoot by testing it, by switching it on. I'll still need to do a bit more testing, but this capacitor here is a 2 microfarad capacitor. It looks like the sort of capacitor you'd need to change. But look at this. 2.1. Unbelievable. 2.1 microfarads for a 2 microfarad capacitor that's 70 years old. Now, are they leaking? Well, let's find out. I've got the capacitor leakage tester connected across that same 100 nanofarad capacitor. It's at low voltage at the moment, and I'm going to switch it on the 100 milliamp scale. So it did the initial charge. It's at 30 volts. I'll put it on the 10 milliamp scale, and I'll start upping the voltage. It's a 630 volt capacitor. This thing only goes as far as 350 or so, but look at that. 10 milliamp scale, 1 milliamp scale, 0.1 milliamp scale. This thing is not leaking at all. This is like a brand new capacitor in value and in leakage. It's absolutely amazing. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that I'll probably be doing more of a cleanup than anything else. I'm going to clean up this whole thing, and I'm pretty happy about this because some of those components in there are very hard to reach. I'm not sure that I could do that without dismantling this whole chassis here, which is quite a task. And I'm going to test the other capacitors, test resistors, and if the components are good, I'm going to stick to the assumption that the wiring is good for this model, which does not correspond to the schematic, as I mentioned. And so task number one is clean everything up, test components. Don't worry about the connections. Just make sure that I don't change anything. Some of these capacitors I've actually got to clip off because desoldering them will actually damage the wiring there. So what I do is I clip it off, and then I'm going to do one of those little squiggly things with a wire. You put it on, it's like a spring, and you solder it on. It's the way they used to do it in the old days. And I've actually shown how this is done in one of my videos. It works very, very well. The result is clean, and we don't damage the connectors that are 70 years old, as I said. And I'll see how far this goes. I'm not sure just what I'm going to do here, but yeah, let me get onto it and show you what it is that I do that I don't know what I'm going to do yet. Okay, see you back soon. Well, I found out that you can actually do quite a lot when you don't know what you're going to do. And I've done quite a lot of that stuff that I don't know what I have to do. I did a full cleanup, top and bottom, front and back, and checked components, and checked for the possibility that these things were loose. I tightened some of them. They didn't really need much at all. Checked fuses. Did not fiddle with the bias pot. Cleaned all that. Cleaned the motors. Tested these capacitors as well as I could, and they seem to be okay. These are in circuit, so it's not that easy. But I did the best I could with all these and the components on the underside of that chassis. Cleaned up solenoids. These capacitors I actually removed to test. They tested almost as good as the other one. 99 point something. This is incredible. I'm gobsmacked. These guys here, these motor capacitors, again cleaned up. There's 3 of them there. They were within 4%, I think 3-4% of what their rated value is. So they seem to be fine, which is great news. Again, more cleaning. That switch down there, which was getting stuck, that was cleaned up. It's working perfectly now. Similarly on the front. Did the best I could here. Some of these things you just cannot repair, and I don't want to go and fake it. We'll see how these work when this thing is put to the test. Those switches were cleaned up. The inside of this was cleaned up. Some of these levers were lubricated. And it looks like this part of the job is done. So here's the situation so far. Part 1, cleaning and checking, done. Testing, I cannot do yet. And there are a few reasons. One of them, my proficiency with using tape decks is fairly low. So I prefer to have the owner, this friend of mine who knows a lot of the the workings of the stuff to do this with me, and we'll be able to test it completely then. But more importantly, this head requires certain signals, namely power supply voltages, from the preamp. The actual tube here doesn't have a B+ supply, which surprised me. I thought this thing would have, to be fully self-contained. It's not. It doesn't have a heater supply, and it doesn't have a B+. I remember when I did the restoration of that, the preamp section, that it had those two voltages going to a socket. And this thing's got a plug on which expects to get those voltages, B+, heater supply, and then of course the signals themselves. So we won't be able to test this without the other unit. And as I said, this doesn't connect exactly onto the other unit. So what I'm going to have to do is get the other unit, figure out which signals I need, check out where these are actually wired onto this connector. This is the main connector, the main power and signal connector. So I don't short anything out. This could be really drastic if you get it wrong. And then we'll be able to test the two together. So that's going to be for another day. This was a rather odd restoration because it's something that I'm not that familiar with, and I cannot actually take it from beginning to end in one go, which was what I wanted to do. But yeah, I enjoy it anyway. This is like, well, Restoration 101, clean it up. I'm actually a subscriber of a real restorer, a real restorer, not a fake one, not an amateur one, not a hobbyist, a real restorer. And it's Baumgartner Restorations. Baumgartner Restorations. And if you want to see how art is restored, and a lot of it is cleaning, go and check his videos. They are incredibly fascinating. I actually really love watching his videos, and I know nothing about art restoration. I have learned a lot about the cleaning process from him. And the guy is really amazing. I think, I don't know how many million subscribers he's got, so he doesn't need me to push his channel, but it really is something that I enjoy watching. Just by the way, I enjoy watching vintage watch restoration as well. Again, if we think this is difficult, imagine pulling apart a Swiss watch, a wristwatch, which you can hardly, you can't see the parts. And I like spending half an hour watching a guy do that, cleaning it up, putting it all back, and it works. The fascination some of these guys show when this thing starts ticking away is the same as when a radio starts making a noise. So it's all got to do with some kind of payback that we get when we do this type of work. It's not actually the subject itself. Obviously, I know nothing about wristwatches and I know nothing about fine art. But anyway, that's what I had to say. So this is it for now. And I've enjoyed it. I haven't shown a lot of the stuff. I didn't need to. It can be quite boring. But I just wanted to report back and tell you that I've got it this far. I'll be taking this further sometime in the future. It'll probably be in the new year because I need to get the other unit back. I need to get some time that I'm free and he's free. So I want to do a video then when we put everything together and actually test it and play and record and, show you what this thing works. Actually, I want to see how this works as well. So once again, I want to thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, click like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And if you want to support the channel directly, you can do so on Patreon. Thanks for watching. Bye for now and stay safe.